Great. Hi, everybody. James Toomey here from SailPoint. What a privilege to be here today. Fantastic day. Thank you very much to Cybertech Risk for helping put the day together, to him and the entire team. My name is James Toomey. I'm a sales director here at SailPoint, covering off of all of Canada. I've been with the company now for about 6 years. Certainly been in the software industry for about 25 years here in Canada, and really witnessed the Canadian landscape kind of mature and grow in leaps and bounds, especially in the identity space over time. I'm certainly privileged today to be joined by two good friends up here on the virtual stage, Doug McPherson and Gerry Owens. What we'll do is we'll take a quick minute to introduce, they can introduce themselves, and then we'll get on to some of the meat of the conversation in our fireside chat. So Gerry, do you want to start off?
Thanks, James, and thanks for inviting me. It's exciting to be part of this conversation, and it's even more exciting to see that the industry has evolved in such a way that we can spend quality time with colleagues in the identity management and identity security space. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Gerry Owens, IT risk and cybersecurity executive with over 35 years in the banking industry. Having recently retired from TD, I'm CEO and founder of GOTAB IT Risk, and currently spend my time helping organizations establish strategies and operating models in order to drive success with their digital identity transformations.
Great. Thanks, Gerry. Mr. McPherson.
Yeah, thanks, James. My name is Doug McPherson. I've been in IT for about 35 years, focused on the IAM market for about 25 of those. I've worked with vendors, integrators like IBM, SailPoint, Deloitte, and Optiv. Recently, I started my own practice, IdentityMD, to help clients make sense of IAM offerings and develop roadmaps to help them implement these solutions.
Great. Thanks, Doug. So for everybody that's attending, this fireside chat's really about you. So we have many clients, many pursuits and install clients that come to us and they ask, where do we start? We've made technology solution decisions in the past. We need to make some decisions moving forward. Some of them say we know that we need some type of a solution moving forward to hit our business targets, our requirements, our governance rules. And where do we start? Where do we start building out that identity foundation? But before we get there, what I wanted to do is have both of you answer kind of the same question. So you've both had some pretty long, very successful careers in identity. And so maybe Gerry, I'll ask you first. What is kind of some of the contributing factors that you see for success in the industry? And then second of all, any advice that you'd have for any kind of the new up and coming professionals that are coming into the industry today? So maybe Gerry, we can start with you and then we can hit Doug.
Yeah, thank you for that question, James. I think it's an important one as we are seeing such a large growth in the industry in terms of driving careers and successful careers. And I'm not sure I'm ready to declare quite yet that I've been successful, but I've had many successes and failures along the journey. And as I would offer advice and counsel to people that are sort of joining the industry and a younger generation that's starting to see the business aspects of this, I think there's a couple of tenets I would share. One of which, of course, is take ownership and be accountable for anything that you own and that you support and that you deliver, so that you're the person that continues to drive quality in everything that you do. Take risks and accept challenges. Jump in where others are often afraid of. I used to have a boss that used to work in departments at the bank that I thought, geez, these don't seem exciting, but he kind of made it the envy of his peers. And it was an interesting sort of epidemic of passion that we've seen across the organization. When you start to think about cybersecurity, it's really important that you learn to articulate both in technology terms and leadership terms, because often you have to influence change, and you either have to often influence those change within the technology teams you're working with, or you're trying to influence change within leaders in order to get some type of executive sponsorship or funding or financial support wherever it's required. And what's really important as well is to be a strong collaborator and influencer as you're working through the organizations that you're dealing with. In many cases, when you're running identity and access management and identity security initiatives, more often than not, you're not the team that's executing on changes, and having an ability to work within those partners, and whether those partners are internal or external, will always give you that level of success to drive your initiatives further. And I think what's always important, particularly in the ID management space, is to help your organization truly understand the business benefits associated with your vision and your implementation strategy, so that they not just understand what it is you're trying to do, but the organization in general understands the relevancy of what you're trying to provide and how fundamentally it is important to the organization in general. Doug, you've got a ton of experience and insights as well. Be interested in hearing your views.
Yeah, thanks, Gerry. And yeah, pretty similar to yours. So, as I mentioned before, I've been in the industry about 25 years and worked with a number of vendors and integrators. So to begin with, I believe you need to develop this ability to sell to your customers. And so, if you're working internally with a company, they might be your management, they might be the end users you're representing, or even IT. So you need to be able to bridge the end user requirements to solution capabilities. Initially I graduated with a business degree, ended up in IT at IBM, and I always enjoy getting to learn the business, right? Understanding what they're doing, on a day-to-day basis, and then how could I apply technology, to make them more effective, right? So when you look at it, there's lots of common use cases to analyze. So being able to customize the message and benefit to your particular industry is a real benefit. So, finally, what I would suggest is, as you go forward, pick your industry sources of information carefully, but regularly invest in IAM education awareness, like the sessions today. Like I say, whether it's a vendor, an integrator, or, most effectively, a user, like a customer, and learning their stories can go a long way into, giving you that toolkit to apply as you work. Because I think at the end of the day, the more you can leverage technology to make your end users successful, the more fun you're going to have and the more successful you will be.
Yeah, good point. I mean, you've got to really take the time to harness the passion to understand what is a business driver versus a technical driver, and how that's going to wrap back around and really bring the success back to the project, right? Kind of leads me to my next question. Today was to talk about inhibitors, right? So what are the things that you see up front that you can kind of predict, that you can understand what's going to happen, why projects fail? Some of those are foreseen, some of those are unforeseen. But I'm going to ask you both the same question, because I think this is really kind of the last one of the day, but I think this is critical to understand. When you see identity projects fail, what are some of the top reasons you see them fail? So Doug, I'll give you a second to get a glass of water and we'll go back to Gerry first. But so Gerry, if you would classify them, I know that there's a lot more than three, but what are the top three items that you see that contribute to project failure?
The three that I see most common, certainly in my experience, is number one, far too often these are treated as just straight technology programs, just implementation of infrastructure and an application service that's just running within a technology stack, and it's not considered a business program. And what tends to happen in those cases is that not enough thought and processes are defined that consider workflow processes, that consider the impact it is on individuals or on business processes in general. The second thing I would say is that there's often there's a lack of understanding around the business problems they're actually trying to solve for. So we get lured and seduced by technology capabilities, but far too often they don't align well with what the technology or the capabilities are trying to deliver in terms of businesses. And a key issue with IAM programs, as an example, is far too often they're kind of over marketed within organizations, and they establish far too aggressive expectations on what's going to be delivered. And I think understanding the business problem and driving it down into very simplistic chunks will certainly help benefit an IAM project or any cybersecurity project that has some degree of complexity. And then lastly, which is really kind of related to the second point, and that is it often doesn't contemplate organizational change management. So not spending enough time helping the organization understand what it is you're trying to do, not enough time spending with the organization trying to help them understand why in fact it's important, and how it aligns to the overall business strategy. And then more importantly, for those that are impacted, how you bring them along for the ride. In fact, it's really important that they understand that they're the success of the program, not necessarily the victims of a program. So I think organizational change management is another fundamental layer.
Thanks, Gerry. Doug, kind of the same question. I'll just refresh it. Top three reasons why you're seeing identity projects fail.
Yeah, so my first one is that, again, I tend to focus on the clients, and I see that a lot of the end users do not really understand what IAM technology can deliver. So instead of taking advantage of these new capabilities, they basically want to automate the old processes. In the assessments that I do for clients, I spend time up front making sure the clients understand IAM and establish a common language for IAM capabilities. So once that is done, I can use demos to show them the art of the possible. And I find that this is where their requirements come together with solution capabilities and new possibilities are opened up. So, I think it makes a real difference when they see how their lives can change, by using these new capabilities. The second one for me is scope, definition, and delivery. By their nature, IAM projects are very complex. And in the past, it tended to be that IT would go away for, 12 to 18 months and come back with something. And unfortunately, they didn't spend a lot of time with the end users. So, the solution they brought would experience very little take up. So what we like to see, what I like to see, is more at kind of 4 to 6 month sprints, right? So the business units need to be an integral part of the project and in the building of the strategic roadmap. Then we need to define tactical steps along this roadmap with discrete deliverables so that the users can see where their requirements will be met and buy into that schedule. Because again, these are complex projects, and at some points, what one business unit might want initially is got to be in phase 3 because we'll have to build up capabilities, to give them what they need. And I find that as long as they're part of the team, and completely understand why they have to be in phase 3, then they go back to their management and explain that, and and be happy. Well, if not happy, understand why it's going to take a bit longer to get to their benefits. The last one for me is data quality. So many times everything else goes right, and then you look at the both the authoritative sources, so identifying who the people are, and then trying to match people to their user IDs and applications, and it doesn't work, right? So especially if you have more than one authoritative source, so if a couple of companies are coming together, or you keep your employees in HR and your contractors in a third part, a third system, you need to make sure that the data that you need is there in those authoritative sources and consistent. I've also seen issues where role definitions in a company are not generally agreed upon by the project members, right? So, for example, customer support. I've seen a customer where the business thought they actually belong to the business, right? Whereas IT says, no, those are our guys, right? So how do I define those roles, and who's the owning managers? Who's going to approve their access rights? So properly delivered, IAM will leverage business information to implement automation, and you need to make sure that information is accurate and consistent across the enterprise.
Kind of goes back to what Camille said, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Don't try to necessarily reuse existing processes. Sometimes it's just not the right fit. It may have been a fit 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. It's not necessarily the same way it's going to do it today. So that being said, Doug, where do you start? When you go into a client and they say, well, we've been offered references, we've been offered value engineering to come in and business value assessments and all that stuff. When you go into a client, where do you start?
Yeah, thanks, James. As I prepared for this event, I was looking for a theme, right? And maybe you've caught it already, but it's that the end users have to be a major part of the IAM program, right? They're the owners, of both the people and the entitlements. The IT is the custodian. So, I want to put something in front of these people that they will like to use and that will change the way they do their business, and, hopefully make it more effective and more easier to do. So from that, the business requirements, should define where to start. I personally like to do a survey where I take the client IAM stakeholders and rank what capabilities are most important to them, and then review those rankings with the team, right? So in some cases, work streams may need to be ordered around the solutions because some capabilities may need to come first. But having the business units, be part of that discussion and have their say gets everybody on board and gets them behind the project, right? So again, emphasize that there should be business requirements that are driving where I'm going to start, whether it's, user attestation, user provisioning, maybe privileged access management. Could be, multi-factor authentication, because I need to make sure that, I've got a lot of people on the road and working at home now, and I want to secure access. But all that being said, my personal favorite point, starting point, is user attestation. If I can, I worked for 9 years with Deloitte, so I had a feel for, what the auditors were asking for. But, if I can attest that every user ID and their associated entitlements on my systems and applications have been accounted for, they've been matched to an owner or user, and that has been approved by their appropriate people, whether it's their direct manager or application owner, right? So now, people that have left their companies, their user IDs have been found and deleted. People that have changed roles and don't need their access anymore. I've fixed all those things up. And by doing that, I've taken a lot of risk out of the business and established a foundation for moving into other capabilities, so whether it's provisioning, access management, and privileged access management. So again, that's my favorite starting point, because as I mentioned earlier about data, it cleans up the data. And while I do user attestations, I identify, the approval processes, who's responsible for what, the organizational structure. So having that in place and working well makes a big difference as you do your implementation. But again, if you've gone through all this action with the end users and privileged accounts are identified as the riskiest problem, right? That's the things that the hackers are aiming for. Then go ahead and do that first. But what you should have is a defined path so that the PAM capabilities that you implement as you move forward can now be integrated into the overall IAM roadmap, right? So if I do PAM first and I pick a solution like CyberArk, in phase 2, I can have a solution like SailPoint manage CyberArk again. So now when I do my user attestations, I understand that you've got an AD account and a bunch of groups to give you access. I also see that you've got an account within CyberArk that gives you privileged access, and I can focus on that because again, it's a risky part of the business, but now it fits into that overall solution. So yeah, that's sum up. Start with the business requirements. They should tell you where to start. If it's kind of equal, then let's go after user attestation to start.
Great. Thanks, Doug. Gerry, do you concur?
100%. I think, what Doug has described is the importance to take a step back, simplify your implementation, and drive out modules of your implementation that can really start to illustrate success and value in shorter timelines. I think the industry has become less tolerant of these long-term 5-year programs that actually don't deliver anything until year 3, year 4, year 5. What Doug has proposed is an ability to start to demonstrate that value. So if attestation is the first element of capability that you deliver on, it's very easy to show how that attestation can roll out across the organization and have milestones that drive out the phased approach in terms of how many different businesses are going to consume attestation over what period of time. So I think that's some absolutely valuable advice.
Yeah, we definitely run into that term sprint quite often, right? Sprint and milestones in a lot of when we get to the statement of work discussions or we get to the planning phase discussions, what are we going to see at this stage? And we've certainly seen those kind of milestone lengths compress over the last 6 years, right? So, but we've seen them compressed down to more palatable type of approach. So, yeah. Gerry, one of the questions I had for you is, you've been around a while, you've seen the industry kind of ebb and flow, seen a lot of vendors come and go, you've seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions. What do you look for in a vendor?
That's a really good question. The first element I would suggest is that I actually look for a partner, not a vendor. I look at a partner that truly understands the industry, both emerging risks and trends, and can help provide guidance to clients around things that they need to prepare for as this future and this emergence starts to occur, in terms of capabilities, and not product centric, but just understand where the industry is going and the type of capabilities that organizations will have to start to build in order to align with the pace of the industry and how it evolves. And then, clearly a partner that can really help understand our business. I've often found, certainly as something as big as a bank, that many times your vendors sometimes know more about the orchestration within your organization than you do. And often understanding that and having that level of partnership allows them to bring that value to the table, so you can start to have conversations around areas and gaps that you yourself perhaps didn't even realize that you needed to solve for. And then lastly, I would say, I really do appreciate a partner that doesn't oversell and overmarket, and certainly don't rely on trendy buzzwords to capture interest in a product. I had a conversation a while back with a potential vendor. We were looking to solve a specific problem with a client that I'm doing some work with. And the first thing they said was, we are, huge supporters, and we solve problems around things like just in time. And so then we kind of pressed that a bit further and said, okay, so what exactly does that mean? How does your service address the challenges organizations have with complexity trying to implement something like just in time? And they used a series of metaphors to describe it. And so the minute you have to use metaphors to describe buzzwords, it tells me that you're not at a point where you're really providing a solution that you think that the market thinks that they need to solve for. And so being very realistic, very true, very genuine about the capabilities that need to be delivered, and not trying to oversell the product because you think that's what's going to interest the consumer, that all of a sudden is going to sign a checkbook. I think those are the elements that I look for when I'm having these discussions with vendors that become potential partners.
Yeah, you make a great point. And it's got to be, a vendor that, you've got your referenceability, but they need to take the time to really understand our client's business just as much as we understand our own solution. Because we can go in and being a client, we can go in and talk about our own solution for 4 or 5 days in a row. But having the ability to go in and talk about the customer's problems is something that I think everybody tries to dance around with certain buzzwords, certain different ways of looking at the business. So a big part of our approach when we're dealing with our organizations is we focus on project success. We focus on business buy-in. We focus on supporting the client as they move forward. How do you ensure that you gain the interest in and really kind of convey to the business how important this project's going to be? And Gerry, that one's for you.
Yeah, well, I think I would say, and I know SailPoint certainly does not do this, but I do get a little anxious when somebody comes in and decides that it's smart to mathematically aggregate the years of service of everybody that's working on the team as an effort to show how many years of service they've had in the industry. Because then you find when they tell you they have 180 years in the IM industry in total, you're thinking, wow, that predates technology itself. So that is very important. I think that partners understand the industry, vendors understand where the industry is going. That's why you're in it. You have innovation labs. You are part of broader consortiums that talk about where the industry is going, what the emerging risks are, and what the emerging technologies and capabilities are. And so I think that there's this paradigm shift that says we no longer wait for a customer to tell us what we want. We need to innovate our capabilities so we can help a customer think in terms of the art of the possible. Your customers don't always know it, right? Your customers understand the terminologies around the capabilities you deliver, but a good partner can come in and help you communicate this from a business perspective that says, think about a day in the life of a person in this new future of identity management, where these are the things that they can do. This is the access they get, and this is how simple it is. and that the system itself is going to point out areas of risk based on where we see trends in AI and systemic access issues that in the past we wouldn't really have been able to identify. So having a partner that can come in and have that level of discussion with us to say, we understand our capabilities, we certainly understand the business that you're in, but here's some things that you may not understand. And it actually goes back to things that Doug said earlier. You know, if you are going to rely on old processes and you're going to try to interject those into new technology, then you're automating your mess for less. And so I think being able to sort of help an organization understand opportunities to re-engineer some of their processes and that they don't have to be loyal to them because you can deliver them, I think is key. And I'm going through that exercise currently with the client that I'm with from a SailPoint perspective, where we have heavy reliance on customized reporting for things like attestation, where SailPoint can deliver those same services. It may look different and may have a different orchestration, but it's satisfying the same compliance issue. And a good partner can help us understand it, so we're being incredibly efficient with our implementation.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We've been given a 5-minute mark here, guys. So I know we had a couple more questions that we wanted to address, but I think one that's extremely important and is, what about adjacent technologies? What about, you've got a ticketing system, you've got an access system, you've got privileged vendors, you've got data that you need to bootstrap into that as well. You've got to integrate it all. You've got to look for a foundational product. How do you plan for that when you guys are going and doing your assessments? And maybe I'll ask Doug to cover that off, and then if Gerry, if you want to cover it off as well. Maybe a 1-minute pitch on what's the importance of integration and how do you take that value back to your stakeholders?
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, so where I like to start is, and I did a presentation a while back on 1 + 1 = 3. So what I found is mature products like SailPoint can now spend the time on that integration, right? So if I can tie together, and I used the example earlier, a PAM solution, so the PAM solution is there to vault your user IDs, and make secure sessions that are being monitored. But it's another application like any other application in the business. It has users, and those users have entitlements. So if I can manage that and include it in my management of all applications, then I'm not using a separate process to do that. So, so that's a benefit to the company. So that's what I'm looking for is, where can I do that? For SIM products, the biggest thing that I can see there is, from an identity point of view, we can provide the identity context to these solutions. So there's some poor guy sitting in front of his SIM console, who sees an alert that says, some guy named Doug Mack, is working late, and he never works late, of course. So, but now he can say, well, Doug Mack. So in the past, you'd be like, well, I got to figure out who Doug Mack is, and it's Doug Mack is not on AD, right? So I have to go into whatever Unix system or mainframe system that he was working on and figure out who he is. Well, a product like SailPoint can say, well, I know that Doug Mack on the mainframe is a unique person, and it's Doug McPherson. He happens to be in finance. His last user attestation was a month ago, and he's got access, right? So in that case, I'm just going to maybe send a note to his manager instead of calling the police because Doug is a third-party contractor who works in payroll and he's been poking around the finance systems, right? So by looking for those integration capabilities, whether it's with your ITSM help desk solution, your UEBA for behavior analysis, there's lots of places there that benefits can be derived and increased, through the integration of the two solutions.
Thanks, Doug. You just chewed up all of Gerry's time. And we've got 400 man years on our ACF too, Gerry, just so you know. Listen, we've got about a minute left.
I'm just going to say whatever Doug said is absolutely valid. That's my valuable input.
I just want to say thank you both. It's always a pleasure. It's really important that you have a plan, you understand where you are today, have a plan that's prescriptive moving forward, have that buy-in from the business, and make sure that everybody's bought in and understands directionally as to what that project success looks like. I want to thank you both very much. It was wonderful talking to you, wonderful seeing you, and look forward to the next round.